Axel didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stopped. Frozen mid-step, his body tense, ears pitched forward like satellite dishes catching something no one else could hear. His deep brown eyes locked on a cluster of travelers near gate C-17, specifically on the smallest one. A little girl, maybe 6, gripping the sleeve of an older child. Her hand trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. Officer Ellie Grant felt the leash grow taut in her hand. "Axel?" she asked under her breath, but the German shepherd didn't flinch. The crowd surged around them in a steady current of movement, roller bags rattling, boarding calls echoing overhead, children whining, phones ringing. The airport was alive with the kind of chaos Ellie had trained herself to tune out. But Axel, he had tuned in. Ellie followed his stare. At first glance, it looked like any tired family waiting to board. A woman in her late 30s, professionally dressed but wearing fatigue on her face, stood with 3 kids. Nothing screamed danger, no shouting, no visible panic. But Axel didn't move. His body had gone rigid beside Ellie, every muscle locked as if something invisible had entered the air and only he could sense it. Then Ellie saw the girl's eyes, not crying, not blinking, wide, hollow, and too still. Ellie's heart skipped. She squeezed the leash gently, a silent cue. Axel didn't budge. Ellie stepped forward, weaving through the crowd, keeping her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that fear often hid behind the ordinary. The woman noticed her approach and offered a practiced smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi there," Ellie said in her most casual, public-facing tone. "Traveling with the whole crew today?" The woman's smile widened. "Oh yes, just trying to wrangle them to Florida. Family trip." "Big group. Just me and the kids." Her hand slipped around the youngest girl's shoulder, subtle but possessive. Axel let out the softest growl, barely audible. But Ellie heard it. More importantly, she felt it. It wasn't aggression. It was warning. The girl flinched at the touch. So small, so quiet, but it was enough. Ellie crouched slightly, angling her body to the girl's line of sight. "Hey there, sweetheart. You excited to fly?" The little girl didn't speak. Her lips barely parted, but her eyes locked on Axel. And that was the moment. She wasn't afraid of the dog. She was hoping he'd do something. The woman's voice cut in too quickly. "She's just shy. It's been a long morning." Axel stepped forward. The move was slow, deliberate. He sniffed the air once, then positioned himself between Ellie and the children. His fur bristled along his spine. A man across the terminal dropped a bag, drawing a chorus of startled gasps, but Axel didn't react. His focus didn't waver. "Mum," Ellie said, keeping her tone even, "can I see your boarding pass?" The woman blinked. "Why, I'm not boarding yet?" Ellie smiled politely, but there was steel behind it. "Airport protocol. We're running random checks." Something flickered across the woman's face. Her fingers tightened on the girl's shoulder. The child winced, so slightly it could have been missed. But Axel saw it. He growled again, louder now, tail stiff, eyes locked. The woman hesitated, then reached into her purse. That's when Ellie's earpiece crackled. "Unit 3, be advised. Possible trafficking flag. Gate C, 3 minors. 1 adult female. Matching alert from ICE." Ellie didn't move. Axel didn't move. The woman froze, her hand still in her purse. Then, her eyes darted towards the gate entrance. Her posture shifted, weight rolling to the balls of her feet. Axel lunged, not to attack, but to block. He positioned himself squarely in front of the children, tail low, body tight. A wall of muscle and instinct. The woman moved, not fast, not loud, but with purpose. She grabbed the two older kids by their backpacks and yanked them forward, dragging the youngest by the wrist. "Ma'am, stop!" Ellie's voice cut across the terminal, but the woman broke into a sprint. Passengers scattered. Ellie bolted after her, radio in one hand, the leash snapping taut as Axel surged ahead. "Code red. Attempted abduction in progress. Gate C-17. Suspect fleeing with minors. Back up now." Axel weaved through the crowd like a shadow. The woman barreled toward the security checkpoint, trying to make it through before lockdown. But Axel was already there, flanking her from the side. He let out a deep, thunderous bark that turned every head. The kids stumbled, one fell, and the woman lost grip. Ellie reached her just as the woman spun, hand raised, panic in her eyes. Not just panic, desperation. She wasn't trying to disappear, she was trying to complete something. "I won't let you take them!" she shouted, voice shaking. Ellie didn't flinch. "They don't belong to you." The woman's eyes filled with something sharp, fury or maybe fear, and she made a break for the service exit behind the gate. But Axel was faster. He blocked her path with surgical precision, teeth bared, not biting, just standing like a verdict. Officers poured in seconds later. The children were crying now, but not in chaos, not in fear of the officers or the dog. It was release, the kind that comes after holding your breath too long. Ellie knelt beside the youngest girl. "Are you hurt?" The girl looked at her, and for the first time whispered, "You saw me." Ellie looked at Axel. He did. Behind them, the suspect was cuffed. Her real name, Lydia North, flagged immediately in a trafficking database. The boarding pass was fake. The children? Reported missing from 3 different states. And the dog? Axel had known it all along. Not from scent, not from bark, but from the silent plea of a girl who couldn't speak. And that was enough. The first time Ellie Grant met Axel, he was muzzled, limping, and bleeding from the shoulder. She hadn't even planned to take a K-9 partner that day. She was just back from deployment, fresh off a medical leave that hadn't done a damn thing to heal the hole inside her chest. She was still raw, still haunted by the one face that never left her dreams. Her sister Mia, 12 years old, vanished on a Tuesday. Never came home from school. They never found her. Just the backpack, dumped in a ditch 2 counties away. And the silence that followed, every unanswered question, every late-night theory, had clawed into Ellie's life like rust under skin. But Axel, he was the first thing in years that didn't ask for anything but trust, and gave it right back. He had been a military working dog before. 2 tours, explosives detection. He was loyal, fast, too smart for his own good, and almost put down after a roadside blast shattered his handler's spine and left Axel wandering in the dust, refusing to leave the man's side for 3 days straight. They called it trauma. The Marines called it retirement. Ellie called it fate. She watched him from the other side of the kennel gate that first afternoon. His eyes didn't blink, didn't flinch, but they held something fierce, something wounded and familiar. It wasn't pity that made her kneel down in front of his crate. It was recognition. They were the same. 2 soldiers built for fight, damaged in ways no X-ray could scan, and still standing. That day she didn't say anything, just waited. Axel inched closer, leaned his weight against the bars, and stayed there. They'd been together ever since. Now, 2 years later, Ellie didn't need commands. She didn't need praise or gestures or treats to communicate with Axel. Their understanding ran quieter, deeper, a flick of his ear, the way his tail stiffened, the way he shifted his weight just before something happened. She read him like muscle memory, and he read her like breath, which is why the incident at Gate C-17 had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Ellie sat alone in the corner of the K-9 unit's break room, staring down at the stainless steel water bowl she'd just refilled for Axel. He was lying nearby, still on alert, his chest rising and falling slowly. Not relaxed. Not yet. He hadn't eaten since the incident, and neither had she. She ran a hand through her short hair, jaw clenched. Her mind kept looping back to the little girl's face. That look. That silence. "You saw her, didn't you?" she murmured, glancing at Axel. He lifted his head, met her eyes. That was answer enough. Ellie leaned back in her chair, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. She knew the signs of trauma. Had seen it in children overseas, had seen it in the mirror. The girl at the gate. She hadn't needed to speak. Her whole body had been screaming, and Axel had heard every word. But what haunted Ellie more than anything else was how close she'd been to missing it. One assignment redirect, one delay, one assumption that the woman's smile was genuine. And those kids could have disappeared onto a plane and never been seen again. A soft knock on the door snapped her out of the spiral. It was Officer Tanya Morales, another K-9 handler holding a manila folder. Dispatch just flagged the woman. Lydia North. Not the mother, not even a guardian. Stolen ID. We're waiting on confirmation, but there are 3 open missing children cases that match the kids' appearances. Ellie's stomach turned. Tanya stepped closer, her voice low. "You good?" "No," Ellie said honestly. But then she looked at Axel. He sat up, ears forward, watching her with that same impossible stillness from the airport. Tanya followed her gaze. "I don't know how he does it." "He doesn't just smell fear," Ellie said quietly. "He smells truth, and he doesn't need words to know when something's wrong." Tanya smiled, but there was weight behind it. "They're saying those kids wouldn't have made it if you'd waited 5 more minutes." Ellie stood, pulled her jacket on. "I didn't save them," she said. "Axel did." Later that night, Ellie sat in her truck with Axel beside her, engine off, watching the last of the airport lights flicker in the distance. The terminal was mostly quiet now. Planes grounded, people home or gone. She hadn't gone home yet. Couldn't. She reached into the glove box and pulled out an old photo, frayed at the edges. Mia, her little sister, grinning at the camera with her front teeth missing, her arms around a chocolate lab named Rudy, their childhood dog. Rudy had died a year before Mia disappeared. Sometimes Ellie wondered if Mia had cried for him when she was taken, wondered if she'd hoped he'd come find her. Axel rested his head on her leg. "You would have found her," Ellie whispered. Axel didn't move, didn't need to. She folded the photo, slid it back. The silence sat between them. Not heavy, not empty. Then Ellie's phone buzzed. It was a text from Chief Daniels. "FBI wants you on this. It's bigger than we thought. Come in early. Bring Axel." She turned to him. "You up for this?" Axel blinked, then nudged her arm gently, like he always did when she hesitated. "Thought so." Ellie reached for the ignition. It had started with a stillness, a glance, a dog who refused to look away. And now it was something more. Whatever came next, they were in it together. Not as handler and K-9, but as survivors, as hunters of truth, as a bond deeper than words. Axel's paws made no sound against the terminal floor, but Ellie could feel the shift in him, like the air pressure around them had changed. The moment they re-entered Gate C-17 after a quick call from security, his posture told her something was off. Again. The children and the woman were still there, seated this time, near the far window. A different gate now, but the same group, the same tension. A paper coffee cup rested on the bench beside the woman, her fingers tapping it too fast for someone waiting for a routine flight. She was scrolling her phone, but not really looking at it. Just enough to look busy. Ellie let Axel guide her. He didn't pull hard, just a firm, deliberate walk towards the group. His body lowered slightly, not aggressive, not tense, but focused, laser sharp. The little girl sat closest to the aisle, backpack clutched tight in her lap, legs swinging over the floor, not quite touching it. Her shoes were too big. Axel stopped directly in front of her. Then he sniffed. Once, twice. Then slowly, purposefully, he leaned his snout toward the girl's backpack, nose brushing the fabric. The bag trembled. So did she. The girl didn't flinch away. She looked up instead. Straight at Ellie. Not the kind of look a child gives an officer when they're nervous. This wasn't shyness. It was something else. Ellie crouched down slowly, resting a hand on Axel's harness. "Hey there," she said softly, careful not to spook the child. "You okay?" The girl's lips parted, but no words came. Her hand tightened on the strap of her backpack, knuckles whitening. Ellie looked up at the woman, who was now watching them with a cool smile, one that didn't match the temperature in her eyes. "Just routine," Ellie said, keeping her tone light. "Security's had a couple alerts in this section today. Mind if I ask where you're headed?" "Orlando," the woman replied smoothly. "Taking the kids to see their aunt. Just trying to make it through this nightmare of a travel day." She gave a tight chuckle. "You know how it is." Her voice was polished, like she'd practiced the line. But Ellie had done this long enough to recognize when someone was selling a story instead of telling one. "How lovely," Ellie said. "You have boarding passes ready?" The woman hesitated. Only a second. But it was enough. "They're digital. On my phone. Just give me a second." She reached into her handbag, rummaging, but her hand shook. Subtly. Most wouldn't notice. Axel did. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a growl, more a low, unsettled murmur that resonated in his chest. It wasn't meant to threaten. It was a reaction. Something was wrong, and he was signaling it. Ellie stood slowly, eyes scanning the scene. The two older children were seated stiffly, backs too straight, eyes too still. One boy, maybe 9, the other girl closer to 11. Both avoided her gaze. The little one, though, she was still looking at Ellie, and now her eyes were glistening. "You have ID for the kids?" Ellie asked, still calm. The woman's expression hardened, just a flicker. "They're my nieces and nephew," she said. "Their parents are in Florida. I wasn't told to carry IDs for them." That was a lie. No parent puts 3 kids on a plane under someone else's care without paperwork. Not in this country. Not after everything that's happened. "I understand," Ellie said. "Can you pull up the digital tickets, please?" The woman hesitated again, then handed over her phone. Ellie didn't even need to check. The screen was still open to a YouTube video. No flight app, no boarding pass. Before Ellie could say a word, Axel moved. It wasn't sudden, just firm. He stepped in front of the little girl's legs and sat. His chest puffed out, his body between her and the woman. Protective. The little girl let out the faintest sound. Not quite a whimper, but enough. "Sweetheart," Ellie said gently. "Can you tell me your name?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she looked at the older boy next to her, then back at Ellie. "It's okay," Ellie said. "You're safe here. Nobody can hurt you while he's with you." She nodded, barely, but the motion was there. Her bottom lip trembled. "Her name is Lily," the woman said quickly. "She's shy. She doesn't do well with strangers." Ellie ignored her, crouching to meet Lily's eye. "Lily, did someone tell you not to talk to police?" Lily blinked. Axel didn't move. Just sat there, unmoving, gaze trained on the woman like he was waiting for a reason. That's when the phone in Ellie's pocket buzzed. "Dispatch." She glanced down. "Flag alert. Female subject matches, person of interest. Human Trafficking Task Force, stand by for instructions. Ellie's breath caught. Her fingers closed around Axel's harness, firm but steady. She looked back at the woman, who had gone completely still. The smile was gone. "Mom," Ellie said, her voice quiet but unflinching, "I'm going to need you to come with me. And I'd like the children to stay right here." "I don't think so," the woman snapped, standing abruptly. "We've got a plane to catch." Axel rose instantly, blocking her path. His tail was down, his muscles coiled. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't need to. His stance said everything. Ellie stepped closer. "You move and you'll answer to him first." The woman hesitated, eyes darting from the kids to the hallway beyond, calculating. Then she did something Ellie didn't expect. She dropped the phone and ran. Axel didn't need a command. He bolted, cutting her off just as she reached the terminal corridor, forcing her against a column. He didn't touch her. Just stood there, chest heaving, a low, warning rumble in his throat. Ellie caught up seconds later, cuffs in hand. "Game's over," she said. As she clicked the cuffs shut around the woman's wrists, she heard the softest voice behind her. It was Lily. "He knew," the girl said. Ellie turned. Lily was standing with her siblings, holding the frayed strap of her too big backpack. "He knew I was scared," she whispered, before anyone else. Ellie met Axel's gaze, her own chest tightening. "Yeah, he did. He always does." Ellie stood her ground, clipboard in one hand, the other resting lightly on Axel's harness. Her badge hung clearly visible, her voice calm and measured. "Mom, I'm going to need to verify identification for the children. It's a standard safety protocol, especially when minors are traveling without their legal guardians." The woman's expression snapped from polite discomfort to sharp offense in a blink. "I don't need to be interrogated," she said, her voice cold. "These are my children. I'm their mother. We're catching a flight, not smuggling diamonds." Ellie kept her tone even. "I understand, but under TSA guidelines we just need confirmation, names, a boarding pass, something." Axel stood still beside her, head slightly lowered, his eyes fixed on the woman. He wasn't growling, but there was a tension in him now, a readiness. He hadn't relaxed since the encounter began, and that, more than anything, twisted unease through Ellie's gut. The woman's gaze flicked towards the children. The older two stared at the ground. Lily, the youngest, remained locked on Axel. She looked ready to cry, but no tears came. Her arms were wrapped around her backpack like a life preserver. The woman took a step forward. "Unless you have a warrant, officer, you're harassing a mother with children. And unless you want this on the evening news, I suggest you let us go." The volume of her voice was rising, not enough to draw a full crowd, but enough to make people look. Ellie's training kicked in. Don't escalate. Don't corner. Keep the tone low. Keep it clean. She spoke softly, eyes steady. "Mom, I just need to see boarding documentation and ID. Nothing more. This doesn't have to be complicated." "I told you, it's on my phone," the woman snapped. She pulled it out and waved it briefly before stuffing it back in her coat. "Look, our flight's boarding. We're already late." And just like that, she grabbed the hands of the two older children and tugged Lily up from the bench, pivoting towards the gate. "Ma'am." Ellie stepped forward, but her earpiece crackled. "Unit 12, respond. Possible unattended bag at Terminal B. Ellie, you're closest. Redirect immediately." She pressed her mic. "In the middle of something. Stand by." The response came back curt. "Priority 1. Command says go. Now." Ellie clenched her jaw. She looked back at the woman, already halfway down the boarding corridor, the kids trailing behind her like loose threads. She felt Axel shift at her side, not moving forward, just watching. His body slightly angled towards them, his head turned, eyes fixed on Ellie. Not judgmental, just asking. Why are we walking away? Ellie hesitated. 5 seconds too long. Copy, she said reluctantly into the radio. Redirecting to Terminal B. She tugged gently on Axel's leash. He didn't move. Axel, she said again, quieter this time. Let's go. Still, he didn't budge. His ears flicked. His gaze remained on Lily, who had turned back at the edge of the corridor. She looked straight at Axel, then at Ellie. For the briefest moment, their eyes met. It wasn't a look of fear. It was betrayal. Then she disappeared through the gate. Axel finally turned, not from obedience, but something closer to surrender. Ellie felt the hollow drop in her chest. Later, she'd try to justify it. She followed protocol. She had no legal ground to detain the woman. She responded to a command priority. But right then, as Axel walked quietly beside her, she didn't feel like she'd done her job. She felt like she'd let someone vanish. The call at Terminal B was nothing. A left-behind diaper bag, a father red-faced and apologetic, and a toddler gnawing on a pacifier. The adrenaline that had spiked in Ellie's veins now simmered into something worse. A slow burn of unease. They circled back to Gate C 17 minutes later. The flight had departed. Ellie stared at the blinking in-flight status on the screen. Her gut twisted. Axel stood beside her, still silent, still watching. He looked up at her, head tilted just slightly. That quiet question again. Did you feel it too? Yes, Ellie whispered, almost to herself. I did. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the airport's shared security system. The woman's name on the manifest. Vanessa Hart. But when she ran it through the internal database, nothing came up. No frequent flyer account. No prior booking history. No ID match. Nothing. A ghost. And the children? No listed guardians, just accompanied by adult. She tried Lily's name, if that was even her name, but no record matched the age or description. She felt something cold settle under her skin. Ellie sat heavily on the bench where they'd been minutes ago. She looked at Axel, who laid down at her feet, head between his paws, eyes still open. I should have held her, she murmured. I should have trusted you. Axel didn't move. Didn't need to. Ellie closed her eyes for just a second, and in the dark, all she could see was Lily's face. Staring back, waiting for someone to listen. Ellie didn't make it 20 feet down the corridor before her phone buzzed. Not a call, not a routine update. A red flag priority alert. Her eyes scanned the screen in one motion. Urgent match, possible child trafficking suspect. Subject visual confirmed near Gate B12. 3 minors in tow. Coordinates matching previous alert. Proceed immediately. Do not engage alone. Her breath caught. Gate B12. Ellie's pulse thundered. She didn't need to think. She didn't need to confirm. It was them. She spun on her heel. Axel, with me. The dog was already moving before the words were fully formed, his leash taut in her hand as they sprinted back toward the terminal concourse. The world around her blurred. Passengers, announcements, the steady echo of heels on tile. Her mind raced. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't a gut feeling or a look in a child's eyes. It was real. It was happening now. And she had let them go. They cleared the last row of vending machines, Axel pulling slightly ahead as they hit Gate B12. The final boarding call for a private chartered flight echoed through the speaker system, distorted by static. At the edge of the jet bridge, she saw them. The woman, Vanessa Hart, if that was even her name, stood with her hand on the shoulder of the older girl, guiding her forward. The 2 other children were lined up behind her, quiet, compliant, like they'd been trained not to make a scene. Lily, the smallest, was at the back of the line. She turned just for a second. Ellie would never forget that look. It wasn't desperation anymore. It was goodbye. Ellie's radio crackled. "Do not approach alone. Officers en route. ETA 3 minutes." No time. She yanked the mic to her lips. "Negative. They're boarding now. I'm going in." She dropped the radio. "Axel, go!" The Shepherd launched forward like a shot, cutting across the gate entrance with the speed and precision of a missile. The startled gate agent barely had time to react before Axel wedged himself between the open door and the woman leading the children. Vanessa froze. So did the children. "Back away from the jet bridge!" Ellie shouted, badge in hand, her voice booming across the terminal. Passengers turned. Phones came up. The moment fractured into chaos. Axel growled, a sound that cut through the noise like a blade. Not wild, not loud, but surgical, commanding. The woman turned, hands half raised, her eyes calculating. She didn't run. Not this time. She knew it was too late. Ellie stepped closer, one hand on her holstered weapon. "Step away from the children, now." Vanessa's voice was calm. Too calm. "This is a mistake," she said. "I'm their guardian. You're going to traumatize them." Ellie ignored her. "Lily," she said, softening her tone. "Can you walk to me?" The girl didn't move. Vanessa's hand twitched. That's when Axel snapped his teeth, not to bite, but as warning. The sound alone made 2 nearby passengers jump. Lily's legs moved. One step, then another. She reached Ellie like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Ellie bent down, hand brushing the girl's shoulder. "It's okay now," she whispered. Lily nodded once, eyes wide, breath shallow. Ellie stood up slowly. "Backup's 30 seconds out. This is over." But Vanessa didn't fold. She took a slow step backward into the jet bridge, and with her free hand she reached into her coat. Axel reacted first. A deep, guttural bark tore through the space as he leapt in front of the children. Ellie's hand went to her sidearm. "Don't." Vanessa stopped. From her coat she pulled, not a weapon, but a phone. She held it out. "This is bigger than you think." Ellie narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" "You think I'm the monster," she said. "But I'm just the courier. You have no idea where they were going, do you?" Ellie didn't answer. Vanessa's lips curled, bitter and sad all at once. "You stopped 3 kids," she said. "Good job. But there are dozens more, hundreds. You're just scratching the surface." Officers burst onto the scene then, weapons drawn. Vanessa dropped to her knees without a word, placing her hands behind her head. Ellie watched the woman disappear beneath a sea of blue uniforms. Axel stayed locked in place until the last child was escorted to safety. Then, finally, he turned to Ellie, his tail lowering just slightly, his eyes still sharp, still ready. She walked over and knelt beside him. "You were right," she whispered. "All along." She wrapped an arm around him, not tightly, just enough. Axel leaned into her. No celebration, no relief, just presence. Then her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a system alert. It was a direct message from an FBI liaison. "Subject connected to larger trafficking ring under federal investigation. Possible ties to interstate child movement operations. We need to talk. Immediately." Ellie stared at the screen. The kids were safe. But the truth? The truth was just beginning to unfold, and it was uglier than anything she'd imagined. The moment Vanessa Hart slipped the cuffs and bolted, Ellie didn't think. She just ran. Axel was already ahead of her. Bounding through the emergency access door the woman had forced open, his paws hitting the tarmac with terrifying precision. The alarm blared behind them as Ellie tore through the doorway, the rush of jet engines and Colorado wind crashing into her senses like a wave. She caught a glimpse of the woman's coat, flapping in the wind near Hangar 4, about 100 yards out. Vanessa wasn't alone. A man, mid-40s, dark jacket, carrying a duffel, was waiting by the rear hatch of a sleek, white, private jet. One pilot stood on the bottom step of the boarding ladder, looking nervous. Ellie's breath caught. They weren't running. They were leaving. "Axel, track!" she yelled, pointing. The shepherd surged forward, cutting across a patch of service vehicles, his nose low, body a blur of focus. He wasn't chasing wildly. He was intercepting, calculating the angles with instinct honed by years of training and trust. Ellie pushed harder, boots slamming the pavement. Her hand hovered near her holster, but she hadn't drawn it yet. Not with 3 children still unaccounted for. Then she saw them. Near the nose of the aircraft, just behind a stack of unmarked luggage crates, crouched the kids. Huddled, silent, hidden. Lily's face poked out first, eyes wide, scanning. Vanessa reached the aircraft door. She turned, waved toward the kids. "Come on!" she screamed. "Now!" Ellie's voice thundered back. "Don't move!" Axel barreled into the space between the kids and the plane, his body low, tail stiff, ears pinned. He let out a rumbling growl, not from rage, but from warning. The children froze. Vanessa hesitated on the stairs. The man behind her reached for the duffel bag, but stopped short when he saw Axel. For one breathless second, everything stalled. Then Lily did something no one expected. She stood. Her legs trembled, her fists clenched. But she stood. Tears streaked her cheeks as she looked at Ellie, then back at Vanessa. "Please," she cried. Her voice cracked, high and hollow. "Please don't let her take us." The sound cut through everything. Even the jet engine seemed to hush. Vanessa stepped down one stair, her face a mix of panic and frustration. "They're confused," she said. "They don't know what they're saying. You're scaring them." Axel moved one step closer, positioning himself fully between the woman and the children. Ellie reached the group seconds later, chest heaving, weapon still holstered, but her voice ironclad. "It's over." Vanessa's eyes darted toward the tarmac perimeter. But the gates were closing. Sirens screamed in the distance, backup now flooding through the airfield. "You're not getting on that plane," Ellie said, "and you're sure as hell not taking them." The man behind Vanessa didn't wait to be told. He dropped the bag and threw his hands up. The pilot, white as a sheet, stepped off the ladder and backed away. Vanessa stayed rooted. Her hands trembled now. "You don't get it? You don't know what they're going back to?" "What I know," Ellie said, stepping closer, "is that these kids are scared of you." Behind her, Lily took a slow step forward. Then another. Her eyes never left Ellie's. She said, "If we told anyone." The girl whispered, "We'd never see each other again." Ellie knelt, lowering her voice. "No one's going to separate you. Not on my watch." Axel moved beside the girl, pressing his body gently against her legs. Not blocking, not guarding, supporting, grounding. Lily leaned into him without hesitation, burying her face in his fur. Ellie looked up, fire in her chest. "You lost," she said to Vanessa. "Walk away while you still can." The woman stood there for a moment longer. Then slowly, she sat down on the bottom stair of the jet ladder. Hands limp, mouth slack, defeated. By the time backup arrived, the scene was under control. Ellie stayed by the kids, letting the other officers handle the arrests. Axel remained still, pressed against Lily's side, his breathing slow and steady. Later, one of the officers would ask Ellie how she knew where to find them. She would simply gesture toward her partner and say, "He never lost the scent." But the truth was deeper. Axel hadn't just tracked them. He had known. From the moment Lily reached out without a word, from the moment he refused to move when Ellie was ordered away, he had known this wasn't about suspicion. This was about saving lives. And Ellie finally had listened. This time, she hadn't left. This time. They were going home. They were sitting in the interview room now, her on one side of the table, Ellie on the other, Axel positioned by the door like a silent guardian. The light was low, the hum of the HVAC louder than either of them had spoken in the last 10 minutes. Ellie stared across at the woman whose real name was finally on record. Lorena Voss. No aliases left to hide behind. No fake IDs, no polished smiles. Just the truth. At least what little of it she was willing to give. Lorena looked smaller in civilian light. Without the plane, without control, without children to manipulate. She wore the standard detention sweats, but somehow still sat like she was in charge. Shoulders straight, chin slightly lifted, eyes narrowed but unafraid. "You're not their mother," Ellie said, breaking the silence. "Never were." Lorena didn't blink. "I never said I was. You let people believe it. You let me walk away." A flash of something, bitterness maybe, passed across her face. "You had your chance back at the terminal." Ellie ignored the jab. "Tell me about the operation." Lorena tilted her head, gave a half smile. "I'm just a middleman." "For what?" She paused, then met Ellie's eyes. "For families. Families who want children, who can't have them the conventional way." Ellie's stomach turned. "We're not talking about adoption agencies here," she said tightly. Because they're broken, bureaucratic, full of rules and delays. These families don't want to wait. They want a child. We find them children, quietly." Ellie gritted her teeth. "You mean you steal them?" Lorena's expression shifted, not guilty, not remorseful. Calculating. "We relocate them. Some are already in foster care limbo. Some come from abusive homes. We do what the system won't." "And what if they're not from any of those situations?" Lorena's silence answered that. Axel stood up slowly, his nails clicking against the floor as he moved to Ellie's side. His gaze never left Lorena. Ellie kept her voice low. "You looked that little girl in the eye and told her to keep quiet. You told her she'd never see her siblings again." "She was scared," Lorena said. "Scared children are obedient. It's safer that way." For a moment Ellie didn't speak. Then calmly she stood and opened the door. Waiting outside in full uniform was Captain Mason. He stepped in. Lorena's smirk faded the moment she saw him. Her posture stiffened. "Mason," she said, voice sharp. "I want my attorney present for—" "You'll get one," he said, cutting her off. "But not before you answer for what you've done. You can't talk to me like that. You trusted the wrong person," Mason said, his voice quieter now. "I've been watching you for weeks." Ellie narrowed her eyes. She hadn't known. Mason turned to Ellie, the lines around his mouth tight. "Internal Affairs looped me in when her name came up in an unrelated trafficking case last year. We suspected someone was moving children through charter flights, but no proof. No leaks." "No leaks," Ellie repeated. "Because no one knew." "Exactly," Mason said. "Until yesterday. What changed?" He looked at her, then at Axel. "That little girl," he said. "The way she looked at your dog. I've seen a lot in this job, but I've never seen a child say so much without saying a word." Ellie exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders in slow increments. "You could have warned me," she said. Mason shook his head. "We couldn't risk Lorena going underground. She's a broker, not a smuggler. She knows how to disappear." Lorena didn't deny it. She just stared at Mason with something close to disgust. "So that was it?" she asked. "You played dumb just long enough to set me up?" "I didn't set you up," Mason said flatly. "You did that to yourself." Ellie leaned against the wall, watching Lorena process the unraveling of her control. The confidence she'd held just a day ago was gone. Her face wasn't that of a mastermind anymore, just another mask torn off. Axel shifted beside her, quiet, focused. "You're going away for a long time," Ellie said. Lorena gave a soft laugh. "You think this stops with me?" "I think," Ellie replied, "you just made the first crack in something that's about to come crashing down." There was a long silence. Then Lorena said, barely above a whisper, "You're too late." Ellie didn't flinch. "You're wrong. We got to those kids in time." Lorena's jaw tensed. "I saw her cry," Ellie added. "I saw her break, but she still spoke up." Axel moved closer, standing in front of Lorena's chair. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. She shifted uncomfortably, for the first time seeming unsure. Ellie watched, quiet pride welling in her chest. She rested a hand on Axel's shoulder. "You read her like no one else could," she murmured to him. Captain Mason nodded toward the hallway. "Feds are here. They're taking over the transport. Full protective custody for the kids. Safe house, trauma specialists, the works." Ellie exhaled. "They're safe. They're safe," Mason said. "Thanks to both of you." Ellie nodded once, her hand still on Axel's back. They turned to leave. As they walked down the hallway, Ellie didn't look back, but she could still feel Lorena's eyes on them. And she hoped, for the first time in her life, the woman understood what real power looked like. It didn't come from fear. It came from loyalty, from courage, and from a dog who never stopped listening. The hospital room was quiet, except for the faint beep of a monitor down the hallway and the rustle of soft blankets. The fluorescent lights had been dimmed, casting a pale warmth over the beds where the children now rested. Lily sat on the edge of hers, legs dangling, swinging gently. She wore a donated hoodie 2 sizes too big, sleeves hanging past her hands. But her shoulders weren't hunched anymore, and for the first time since Ellie had met her, the fear in her eyes had softened. Axel lay near the door, alert but calm, his head resting on his paws. His ears twitched every time a nurse walked by, but he didn't move. Not until Lily stood. She walked over, slow and barefoot, the linoleum cool beneath her feet. She paused just a step away, eyes focused only on him. "Is he going away too?" she asked, her voice so soft Ellie almost missed it. Ellie, seated in the corner chair with her arms wrapped loosely around her knees, looked up. "No," she said gently. "Not unless you ask him to." Lily turned back to Axel. He stood slowly, as if understanding he was being invited. Then, without prompting, he stepped forward and lowered his head beside her legs. Lily reached out. Her fingers trembled, but they landed softly on his back. She left them there. Her breath hitched once. Then her shoulders fell, finally letting go of something heavy. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "I knew he was good," she whispered. Ellie blinked hard, hiding the sting behind her smile. Axel didn't wag his tail. He just stood still, solid and quiet, a presence more powerful than words. Behind them, one of the agents peeked into the room, but Ellie waved him off. "Give them a minute." He nodded and backed away. The 2 older siblings sat together on a nearby bed, watching quietly. The boy, Jason, clutched a small notebook he'd been given, already filled with drawings, planes, dogs, one with a badge on its collar. They weren't healed, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But they weren't hiding anymore. Ellie stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sky had begun to shift toward gold, sun filtering through late autumn leaves, the kind of calm that came after a storm. Not peace, exactly, but promise. Later, when they left the hospital and the children were escorted to their temporary home, Axel walked beside them the whole way. Ellie watched as he paced gently behind Lily, as if guarding her shadow. Before they stepped into the vehicle, Lily turned and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." Axel closed his eyes, pressing his forehead gently to her side. Then he turned and trotted back to Ellie, head high. Days passed. The reports had been filed. The federal team took over the broader case. Lorena Voss was now in custody, facing a long list of charges. The private jet company had been shut down for investigation. Several arrests had already followed in 3 other states. Ellie sat at her desk back at the precinct. Quiet. No movement. Just her and the silence after everything. The world kept going. Flights took off. People hurried past. But inside her office, time slowed. She looked at the photo now pinned to her corkboard. Lily, holding Axel's collar gently, her eyes brighter than they'd been at the airport. Behind it, a folded drawing Jason had given her. A stick figure, Ellie, and Axel beside her, with a red heart floating over them both. On the desk, a small box. Inside, Axel's old service badge, the one he'd worn during his first military deployment. It had been damaged and scratched, retired after his discharge. Ellie had kept it, tucked away. Today she placed it in a small glass frame. Next to it she added a label. Simple, honest. He didn't just detect danger, he saw a child begging to be seen. She stepped back. Axel lay behind her, as always, watching, waiting, still ready. The phone rang. Another case, another shift. But not before Ellie walked over, knelt by Axel, and pressed her forehead lightly against his. "You did good," she whispered. "We did good." He licked her cheek once, soft and brief, then exhaled and rested his head on his paws. Some stories don't end with explosions or dramatic takedowns. Sometimes they end with a child's hand on a dog's back. Sometimes they end with silence finally broken. And sometimes they begin again with a new call, a new case, because the fight isn't over. But this one ended with a truth that couldn't be ignored. A dog who listened, a girl who was brave, and a bond that reminded the world what it meant to really see someone. If this story moved you or reminded you of a loyal animal that changed your life, don't forget to share your thoughts below. Subscribe to German Shepherd for more true stories of courage, healing, and the dogs who make it possible. Because sometimes the quietest heroes don't wear capes, they wear collars,